Here is my reaction. Hello everyone, this is William here. I'm going to say why I don't trust the Steam Workshop that very well for any game on Steam because of this incident and a previous incident that happened a month early, I should say. This is from Windows Central. I've got a medium.com article about the same thing and more detail about it. So basically this video will be a bit longer discussing the full breakdown of how this happened. If you don't feel like watching the entire video, just read the key takeaways in the beginning half of the video if you don't want to see the entire video. That's up to you. Key takeaways in the beginning half of the video if you don't want to see the entire video. That's up to you. This is from Windows Central. A Steam Workshop map for Mecha Chameleon was dropping malware onto players' PCs, researcher says. Story by Cale Hunt. This is published July 24th, which is today, 3-minute read, updated 2 hours ago. The key takeaways are malicious maps. Some custom Steam Workshop maps for Mecha Chameleon are rigged to drop malware onto players' PCs via hidden scripts. How it works. A blueprint actor in the map auto runs, injecting a batch file into the documents folder and launching a hidden PowerShell process to download additional scripts. Safety tips. Avoid maps with no reviews or disabled comments. Run a PC antivirus scan and check for suspicious .bat files in your documents folder. It seems like everyone these days isn't playing the insanely popular indie game Mecha Chameleon in PC, my friends included. If you've also played, you're going to want to double check what custom user-created maps you've downloaded from the Steam Workshop. Worse, if you already downloaded some custom maps for the game, I strongly suggest you A. finish reading about the issue and B. check your Steam library. Note that if you have a computer with Mecha Chameleon installed, it's best to isolate your computer from the internet in your local home network temporarily to check for the malware before you get back online again on it. A security researcher who goes by Feint on Medium.com recently posted a lengthy analysis breaking down their findings. They posted that some workshop maps associated with Mecha Chameleon are quietly being rigged to drop malicious scripts, aka malware, onto players' PCs. Feint began the investigation after friends noticed a command prompt window flashing briefly as Steam downloaded a custom workshop map for the game. These downloads are handled automatically as you load into certain game lobbies. On the surface, the custom map files look totally normal with standard Unreal Engine 5 asset containers and a lack of evident executables for scripts. Digging deeper, however, Feint discovered the real problem. A blueprint actor with a naming mismatch buried inside the map's metadata. It was built to look like an ambient controller, but an outdated internal name that tipped off the researcher. According to Feint, the blueprint is built to run automatically in the moment the map loads. When it does, it injects a batch file into the gamer's documents folder on their Windows PC. Not good. That's a red flag. Once triggered, the batch file sneakily launches a hidden PowerShell process bypassed execution policy before calling out to an outside server to download a second script. Feint's testing resulted in the download failing, so it remains unclear what exactly was intended to be sent to infected PCs. No name for the malware, but a map shouldn't act like this. Although the final goal of the odd script is debatable, a game's map should never involve writing and executing scripts outside of the game's folder. This is a clear sign of malware, as a second red flag. Feint also notes that there are some red flags surrounding the account that uploaded the map to Steam Workshop. The Steam account is only about a week old and has comments rating disabled on the listing, making it much harder for savvy victims to share their woes. The malware-infused map has been reported to Steam, though it's unclear whether any actions have been taken yet. What should you do if you download the Mecha Chameleon Workshop maps? Until Valve confirms that the map is malicious and pulls from the Workshop library, your best bet is to avoid any new Mecha Chameleon maps, especially if they lack reviews and or have comments disabled. If you downloaded custom maps recently, it's probably worth running a PC scan for your favorite antivirus. You can also check your documents folder for any strange bat files hanging around. To be clear, this isn't the fault of the developers, rather, this is another bit of potential malware that slipped past Steam's workshop screening process. Just last month, Steam's most popular PC background app, Wallpaper Engine, was discovered to be infecting users with malware. Valve, owner of Steam, took the necessary steps to remove infected files, but added that this sort of thing could eventually happen again, and it just did in July. Here is the Medium.com article in full length of what happened. Now, here are the table of contents. A lot of that. So there's the intro, the initial symptom. First, look at the workshop files, verifying the asset files. AssetRegistry.bin reveals first clue. Opening the Unreal Engine 5 asset container, reverse engineering the blueprint, extracting the embedded payload, and analyzing the dropper script, confirming execution on infected PC, did the second stage execute, analysis summary, limitations and unknowns, IOCs, and final verdict. A couple of my friends reported seeing a command prompt window briefly appear while Steam was downloading a custom workshop map. The map was being downloaded through the game's in-game lobby, and once the download completed, it immediately began loading the match. Since the command prompt window appeared during this transition, I decided to investigate the workshop files. What I found was seemingly an ordinary workshop map that contained what appears to be a malware dropper despite having passed workshop review. I'm writing this up because, as far as I know, the map is still available, and because the techniques it uses to hide are worth understanding if you download workshop content. While there are still few parts of the execution chain I can't fully explain, the artifacts themselves are interesting from a reverse engineering perspective. The initial symptom. A black command prompt window flashed on screen for about a second before disappearing. It's very fast. It appeared while Steam was still downloading the workshop map just as the game was transitioning into loading it for the match. There were no crashes, error messages, or any unusual behavior. On its own, it would have been easy to dismiss as Steam is running a background process, but seeing a console window appear during a workshop download match launch was unusual enough to decide to investigate. First, look at the workshop files. The workshop content is located here. Right where it says Steam, right where the workshop content is where that path is on Windows. At first glance, there's nothing suspicious in the shoulder. The contents are the asset registry bin file, a PNG file, a VDF that is. It's got a .pack file, a .unreal content asset thing, and the Unreal talk or utalk, ucas, and .pack files. There are no executable DLLs or batch files or scripts. The .pack, .ucas, and .utalk files are simply the standard Unreal Engine 5 asset container format used for packaging game content, exactly what you would expect to see from a UE5 map or mod. This is worth emphasizing. If you were manually checking this folder for malware, there would be no obvious red flags here. Nothing in this directory suggests anything malicious. That is likely why it passed through you in the first place. Verifying the asset files. File extensions are easy to spoof, so I checked the actual file headers and scanned the contents for embedded executable data. The results. utalk starts with dash equals dash sign string, which is the real IO store magic. Pack has the correct hexadecimal footer magic. No MZPE, ELF, or zip headers anywhere in the file. The files appear to be valid Unreal Engine asset containers, not disguised as executables. There's no standalone executable payload present in this mod. If there is unexpected behavior, it would have be occurring through the game's normal asset loading pipeline rather than from including executable file. The asset registry.bin reveals the first clue. This is the detail that stands out from most of the entire investigation. AssetRegistry.bin is largely readable metadata. You can open it in a text editor and see references to the actors placed throughout the maps. Normally, it contains exactly the kind of information you would expect: static mesh actor, point light, player start, and other standard Unreal Engine objects. However, one blueprint actor immediately stands out. Its class resolves as BP ambient controller _C. Those two names together are unusual. The class name suggests a harmless environmental or lighting related system, especially since it appears under folders such as environment and lighting. However, the place actor still remains the older name BP underscore RCE underscore test underscore C underscore 0. In Unreal Engine, this can happen because place actors keep the name they were created with even if the blueprint class is later renamed. Renaming the class does not automatically rename every existing instance placed in the maps. That means BP underscore RCE underscore test name likely existed at an earlier point in the asset's history. Whether intentional or not, the old identifier remains embedded in the map metadata. The same reference appears across 3 separate maps included in the workshop item, including a new map underscore backup file that appears to have been left in upload. Opening the Unreal Engine 5 asset container. The blueprint data is stored inside the UDL compressed.ucast container, reading the accompanying UTOC metadata reveals. No encryption flag is present, meaning that the container can be inspected using available Unreal Engine asset tooling and compatible UDL Kraken decompression support. All 131 blocks are decompressed, successfully producing roughly 5.3 megabytes of extracted data. The container contains 55 assets in total: materials, meshes, textures, 4 maps, and 3 blueprints. 2 of those blueprints appear to be untouched sample assets from the official mod kit containing no custom logic. Searching across the extracted asset data revealed only a small number of notable references. These references are concentrated in a single blueprint rather than being distributed throughout the package. There does not appear to be an additional hidden logic elsewhere in the container, which makes the relevant behavior easier to isolate and analyze. Reverse engineering the blueprint. The complete function chain is right here. Despite the blueprint being named like an environment or lighting system, the logic does not appear to perform any lighting, ambience, or world management functions. Instead, it constructs a file path and writes data to disk. Tracing the blueprint bytecode shows the path construction right here. Receive begin play is normally called when the map begins loading, which does not fully match the behavior reported by some users who observed activity during the download process itself. That discrepancy is not explained by the blueprint logic alone, so this is worth treating those reports separately from the behavior confirmed through the asset analysis. 7. Extracting the embedded payload. A single embedded string inside the blueprint contains the following data right here. That's the payload data or the following data that calls to an outside server to download more scripts to run. The string is structured as a JSON branch polyglot. It's actually JSON. JSON is JavaScript object node, from what I'm guessing. It's a valid JSON file while also containing batch command syntax inside the JSON key. The command content is therefore preserved written as JSON data, JSON, but can also be interpreted as a batch script as resulting file is executed. This format is significant because the earlier blueprint data analysis showed that the file writing setup uses toFile, which writes JSON data. The embedded content appears to be designed to satisfy that JSON or JSON requirement while retaining the executable command syntax. The combination of the JSON-compatible wrapper and embedded command execution logic is not typical or normal Unreal Engine asset data and is a strong indicator that the content was deliberately constructed rather than being accidental or generated by the engine. Analyzing the JavaScript. The extracted script is also human readable right here. Notice it says PowerShell-W hidden-EP bypass, and it also has a HTTP IP address that calls to another outside server to download a batch script file, a secondary one, and executes it. This script uses a simple 2-stage execution flow. On the first run, _z is not defined, so the script sets the variable, launches a minimized copy of itself, and then exits. This relaunch behavior explains a brief command window flash reported by some users. At this stage, the script is acting as a launcher rather than performing the main action. On the second run, the _z variable is already present, so the script follows the alternate branch. It starts PowerShell with a hidden window, modifies execution policy for that process, downloads the Steam b.bat from a hard-coded external address, I meant to say hard-coded, not bar-coded, saves it to the temporary directory and executes it. The _z check appears to exist solely to prevent the script from repeatedly relaunching itself. The script itself is relatively simple. There is no evidence here of persistence mechanisms, privilege escalation, or sophisticated obfuscation. Its main purpose appears to be retrieving and executing a second stage script. That second stage is hosted externally, meaning its contents can change independently of the original mod package, confirming execution on an infected PC. Once on an infected system, I found that a file was byte for byte identical to the payload string embedded in the blueprint. It was located the exact path identified during the bytecode analysis. This confirms that the blueprint logic was not just theoretical. The file writing behavior observed during the reverse engineering occurred on a real system. Did the second stage execute? The second stage file temp% /s.bat was not present on the affected machine. The PowerShell operational log explains why. Error message 404 not found in that image. The download request failed with an HTTP 404 request response to the time of execution because the file was never successfully retrieved. Nothing was written to disk, and the following cmd/c command had no script to execute. On this system, the second stage did not execute. The contents and behavior of this downloaded payload remain unknown because the external file was unavailable at the time of analysis. The address embedded in the script resolves to 31.57.34.228. At the time of analysis, this IP address was geolocated to Amsterdam, Netherlands, and was associated with blockchain Creek BV ASN 207.994. This information identifies the hosting infrastructure used by the download URL, but it does not identify the operation of the server or establish attribution. The important finding is that the blueprint attempted to retrieve an additional payload from an external location rather than containing the final payload entirely within the workshop files. This is going to be very, very long, so bear with me. Analysis summary. Based on the evidence recovered from the workshop item, this should be treated as malicious content. That conclusion does not rely on a single indicator. It comes from the combination of several independent findings. The workshop uploader account appears to have been created only about 1 week before the item was published. The workshop map currently does not allow users to leave comments or ratings. The only blueprint containing custom logic was originally identified as BP_RC_test and later appeared under a name consistent with a harmless environment or lighting controller. The blueprint executes automatically through the receive begin play rather than requiring an intentional user action inside the map. And its logic data writes data outside of the game directory onto the user's documents folder, which is unrelated to normal map or asset behavior. The written content is deliberately structured JSON batch polyglot, allowing data written through a JSON-only function to retain executable batch syntax. That script launches hidden PowerShell, bypasses local execution models for the process, retrieves a second stage file from a hard-coded external address, and attempts to execute it. What remains unknown is the purpose of the final payload. The second stage script was not successfully retrieved during analysis and was no longer available from the remote location, so its behavior cannot be determined. Claims that it was specifically an info stealer load or another type of malware would be speculation without that payload. Limitations and unknowns. What does Steam B.bat do? Unknown. The second stage payload was not delivered during analysis, so its final behavior cannot be determined from the available evidence. Here, the indicators of compromise. Final verdict. Based on everything I found, I believe this workshop item is very likely malicious, but there's still parts of the execution chain I couldn't directly observe. What I can say with confidence is that the asset contains a blueprint whose only meaningful purpose is to write a batch file outside the game's directory into the user documents folder. That batch file then attempts to launch PowerShell with the execution policy bypassed, download a second batch file from a hard-coded external server and execute it. I can't think of a legitimate reason for a Steam Workshop map to write a .bat file to the user documents folder and then use PowerShell to fetch and run another .bat file from the internet. Even without knowing what the second stage contained, that behavior is extremely difficult to explain as anything other than a malware delivery chain. Could this be some edge case I'm missing? Absolutely. That's why I've tried to separate facts from assumptions throughout this write-up. But given the evidence recovered from the assets themselves, I think calling this malicious dropper is the conclusion best supported by the data. Further independent investigation is encouraged, particularly if additional evidence becomes available. For now, the workshop item and uploader have been reported as flagged for review. Cheers, stay safe from Faint B. So this is on medium.com where some idiot decided to upload a Mecha Chameleon map mod that has malware in it, possible malware, but whoever made that particular mod map decided to embed a malicious dropper into it, decided to do that, then possibly update it with a info stealer malware, something worse in that malware dropper thing at a later point. Well, luckily this was averted because the execution of the batch script in PowerShell did not fully launch and failed early on. That was most likely a pretest to see what would happen next time if that idiot decided to utilize the Steam Workshop again to infect millions of PCs with Mecha Chameleon, the popular indie game. Now, this is not the first time this has happened. The wallpaper engine got hit, and now Mecha Chameleon a month later. Even Valve themselves pointed out that this sort of thing can inadvertently happen again, which it did twice within 2 months apart. June and July is a total of 2 months this has occurred. Last month it was Wallpaper Engine in June. Now in July, here comes Mecha Chameleon a month later. So this is why I should say you need to be careful with the Steam Workshop, because if not, you could inadvertently be downloading malware through the Workshop by accident if someone sneaks malware into a Steam mod for a particular game like Mecha Chameleon or any other Steam program, could sneak malware into it and slip it past Steam Workshop's review, and then you get this sort of thing happening again eventually. So that's all I have to say. This is William signing out. See you next time. Bye bye.